Okay, good morning, everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Monday morning. Monday morning, everybody, and Shavua Tov. Today's class is sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shema of all Am Israel. Amen. Okay, my friends, we have this week, if you're in anywhere outside of Israel, we have a double header. Okay, we're going to be reading two Perashiot, and I warned you about this. Okay, I told you that because the way Shavuot fell out this year, it was on a Friday and Saturday. So what that meant was that in Israel, where they only keep one day, it was only going to be Friday, and then Saturday was going to be the regular Torah reading. Here in America, or wherever you are listening outside of Israel, it is not a 2-day. It was a 2-day holiday, and therefore, what that meant was that we read Shavuot Friday and Saturday. So Shabbat did not get a Shabbat reading. Shabbat get Shavuot reading, and so Israel was actually 1 week ahead of us in the weekly Torah reading. Okay, so they got to know what happened first before us. But what that means is that we have to catch up. We got to catch up because we all have to finish on Simchat Torah. So how do we catch up? We catch up this week. Okay, so this week, as we're going to read two parashas, in Israel they're going to only read one. Okay, in Israel they're only going to read one, and we read two. So we catch up. Okay, and next week will be together with Israel every week. Okay, but either way, we have a double header this week: Parashat Hukat and Parashat Balak. So what does that mean? That means we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to cover, and each parasha is juicy and has its own to talk about. And what that also means for us is that we have two introductions from Rabbeinu Bachye as we are trying to study his introduction. Yeah, I could sense your excitement, everybody, through the Zoom. I could sense your excitement through the phone. I know. I can't. I couldn't hold myself either. I was jumping out of my seats when I heard this news. Two Rabbeinu Bahyes. Wow, what amazing news. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so here we go, my friends. And the truth is, I don't want to spend too much time on the Rabbeinu Bachye because, like I said, we have to talk about the Rabbeinu Bachye. We have to talk about the. We have to talk about the parasha itself. Okay, but let's just touch on the introduction of Rabbeinu Bachye. Okay, and Rabbeinu Bachye, if I could just go up to it, give me a second, please. I apologize. Let's just talk about for a second the name of our parasha. Okay, what's the name of our parasha mean? Anyone know? Parasha Hukat. What does Hok mean? Excellent. Okay, Hok means. Okay, let's find it over here. Hok refers. You know what? Let's let Rabbeinu Bachye talk. Okay, going up to the beginning of chapter 19. Here we go. Okay. He quotes always. He begins with a pasuk from Mishlei, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on the pasuk today. I just want to bring out one point and then move on to the middle of the parasha where there is a lot of action. Okay. Wow. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time scrolling up. Okay. Here. He quotes a pasuk from Mishlei. The pasuk says, Beni, my son, okay, or my daughter, Shemor, Amarai, Umitzvotai, Titzpun Otcha. Okay, he says, my son, heed my words, treasure my commandments within you. Shemor mitzvotai v'chaya v'torotai ki ishon enecha. Keep my commandments and live, and my teachings as the apple of your eye. Okay, the same way you protect your eye, protect my commandments. Okay, and there's again a lot to talk about and a lot to elaborate. But Rabbeinu Bachye over here wants to just again connect it to the beginning of our parasha, and look what he says. He says we know we have 613 mitzvot. HaMitzvot kulan nehlekot al shlosha chalakim, but they are divided into three categories. Okay, category number one, mitzvot mekubalot, mitzvot that we receive through tradition. Number two, mitzvot muskalot, commandments that are logical. And number three, mitzvot she'en ta'amam negla u'mevuar, mitzvot that we don't know the reason, they don't make sense to us. And he elaborates mitzvot mekubalot. What are examples of mitzvot mekubalot, mitzvot that we receive through tradition? It's the mitzvot that you need God for. The mitzvot that we wouldn't know unless God commanded them. Right? So think of a commandment that would be in this category, that if God didn't tell you, you wouldn't really know how to do it. Okay? That would be tefillin, tzitzit, he says milah, sukkah, shofar, lulav. Yeah. All the traditional mitzvot, the holiday commandments, These are all mitzvot that, I mean, I wouldn't know to take a, to take a cow, cut off its horn, to take a ram. It can't be a cow, right? To take a ram, cut off its horn, and blow it on the first day of the year. I wouldn't know to do that. Usually it's not how people celebrate New Year's. You know what I mean? So this is the first level. Okay, they're mitzvot from God, and they're in the language of the Torah. What are they called? These mitzvot? Anyone know? What are these commandments called? They're called edut. Okay, they're called edut. Why? Because these mitzvot really are testimony. What does ed mean? Ed means testimony. When we keep them, we're testifying to a God. Why would you blow a shofar unless you believe in a God? Why would you sit in a sukkah unless you believe in God? Yes, they go hand in hand. You can't sit in a sukkah and then say, I don't believe in God. Why would you sit in a sukkah then? Right? Why would you lean to the left 45 degrees eating this hard bread, in the middle of Nisan? Why would you do that unless you believe in God who took us out of Egypt and we're celebrating Passover to remember it? Yeah? Shabbat. Why would you keep Shabbat? When we keep Shabbat, you should know you're testifying that God created the world. That's what you're doing. That's why when we do Kiddush Friday night, we stand up. We stand up on Kiddush because we are witnesses. And we're testifying. We're giving over testimony that we believe that the world has a creator. That's what you're saying. Today when a person does certain things or wears certain colors, what are they saying with those colors? They're saying, I believe in this. I support that. Pride in this thing, right? That's the world that we live in, right? People walk around. When you wear a Yankee jersey, when you wear a sports team, right? You're saying, I'm proud. This is who I follow. This is what I believe in. When a person keeps Shabbat, you know what they're saying? I believe in a God that created the world. Or else, where does the number 7 come from? Ask an atheist, where does 7 come from? Why do we have 7 days a week? Why is it not? Or who made up the concept of a week? If you think about it, I'm saying it's a very interesting question. Where does 7 days a week come from unless you believe in Shabbat, in creation from the Torah, that it was a 7-day cycle, a 7-day process? If it's just, if there's no creator, if the world was created, if there was a big bang and it happened alone, so it happened alone. So it could be, there shouldn't be a week. There should be maybe months over the moon. There should be years for the sun. But where does a week come from? A week? That only comes from God. Yeah, we have to admit that there's a God in order to keep Shabbat. 7 days a week, right? Very interesting idea. Okay? Anyways, all these mitzvot are called edut. Okay? And this is mentioned many times. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, "Va'adabera be'edotecha." David would say, I would speak of your edut when I was in front of other kings. We quoted this pasuk last week. How a person in life has to be confident in what they believe in. David HaMelech, when he was with other kings, what would he talk about? He wouldn't try to talk about, king language or king talk. He wouldn't talk about how many people he killed that week. He wouldn't talk about how many countries he conquered that year. You know what I mean? David HaMelech, he says when he was in front of other kings, you know what he would talk about? Religion. God. I would speak about edut velo evotion. I'm not embarrassed. Yeah? He wouldn't give in to peer pressure. He didn't care that there was that maybe it wasn't cool or trendy to be religious. David didn't care. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of what I believe in. And what does he call those commandments? Edotecha. Edut. Okay, that's the first category of mitzvot that God gave, and they reveal His oneness. I guess they reveal, they show that we believe in a creator. Okay, then there's mitzvot muskalot. Then there are mitzvot that are very rational. That's a mitzvah that a person could really come to conclude on his own. Stealing, usury, charging interest, retzicha, murder, theft, okay, and all the like. What are these called? Anyone know in the language of the Torah and the rabbis? What is this called? The second category are called, give it a couple of seconds if anyone wants to write in their answer. These are called, the first one we said is called edut. This one is called mishpatim. Okay, mishpatim. By the way, there is a parasha called Parashat Mishpatim. We read it in December, January time, and it deals with all of these commandments that are very rational. Okay, help your friend, and don't steal, etc. Okay, mitzvot. Then there's the third category, the commandments she'en tamam nigle, that we don't really know, and that is kilayim. You can't mix wool and linen, or you can't eat meat and dairy. And anyone that tells you meat and dairy is because of health, just show them a piece of schnitzel. Ain't nothing healthy about schnitzel. You know what I mean? Either way, we don't know why. We don't know why we keep meat and dairy. We don't know why we have to send off the goat and throw it off a cliff on Yom Kippur, or the red heifer, the para aduma. Yes, these are all called hukim. And by the way, our parasha is called Parashat Hukat, and it begins with the laws of the red heifer, the para aduma, that if a person is tameh, if a person is impure, take the ashes of a red cow. And today they're saying they found them, and they didn't find them. I actually saw a guy in the synagogue. He's in charge of finding red cows all over the world. The guys went all over America. He found a couple. He showed me pictures. Not a single area that has two hairs that are not red in the same spot. Unbelievable. And this is part of the school that believes that if we want Mashiach to come, we have to be proactive, and we got to bring the red heifers. We got to start building the temple. We got to start creating. Okay, that's their opinion, but either way, he was transporting to Israel these cows. Okay, so we have even till today. I mean, by the way, when we say red, it's not like a bright red. It's not like a neon red. You know what I mean? It's like orange. Orange. That's para aduma. And you've seen orange cows maybe. Yeah? But either way, fully orange with no area that has white hair or black hair or any other hair coming to from the same spot. And these are called chukim. These are mitzvot that we don't really understand, right? Why, if I sprinkle the ashes of this cow, all of a sudden the guy's clean now? How does that make any sense, Rabbi? You're right. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? And by the way, right, we have in the Haggadah of Pesach, the Pasuk says, based on the Pasuk in Devarim, Ki shalcha bircha, one of the four sons. He says, Ma ha'edut v'achukim v'hamishpatim. He's dividing these three. What are the edut and chukim and mishpatim that God commanded? And you see that he's dividing the commandments, this son, into these three. Okay? And this is the chacham, so he's a wise son. He knows how to divide the mitzvot into three categories. Okay? And you tell him, Avadim hayinu lefaro b'mitzrayim. Yeah? You tell him that there was a God, and if there's a God, then there's edut. Okay? And we have to keep all of the types of commandments. Not only the rational ones, even the edut, even the chukim. Okay? Fine. And this is really, and he connects it to the Pasuk in Mishle that we read, and if you pay attention, King Solomon in this verse, he listed three different mitzvot. Amarai, mitzvotai tatzpun, and mitzvotai vahaya. And he says Amarai are the edut, mitzvotai vachaya are the rational mitzvot, because when you keep the rational mitzvot, the world can live and exist. Vachaya, it will live. And then mitzvotai tatzpun is the hidden commandments, right? That's the chukim. And then again, this is just a good introduction to know. It's good to know this as a Jew, the three different categories. And our parasha is called Parashat Hukat because it deals with the chok of para aduma. And I always found it interesting, by the way, that not only does it deal with the chok of mitzvot, but the same way there are mitzvot that don't make sense, my friends, and we've spoken about this in the past. There are also circumstances in life that don't make sense. And sometimes we experience things that we don't understand, and we don't get it, right? Why do sometimes good things happen to bad people, and why do bad things happen to good people? And sometimes there's death and there's sickness, and we hear and we're like, ya haram, we don't get it. Why, Hashem? Where's God? Right? So the same way God is sometimes hidden from commandments, we don't understand para aduma. There are also things in life that we don't understand. Yeah, and those are also chukim. And the same way when we have a mitzvah that we don't get, but we do it anyways, so too there are circumstances in life that we don't get, but we have to live anyways. We have to believe anyways that there is a God, that there is a reason. Maybe I don't get it, maybe I'll never get it, maybe I'll never find out why, but it's a mitzvah that I keep. In the same way I blow shofar, that makes no sense. In the same way I sprinkle ashes, which makes no sense. In the same way I wait 6 hours for meat and dairy, which makes no sense. But I believe it comes from God. I also have to believe that the life that I have and the circumstances in anyone's life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the easy to swallow and the harder to swallow, they all come from God. That's also part of emunah. Part of emunah is believing that there are chukim, not only in commandments, there are chukim in life, in the bigger picture of life. And I always found it interesting that the parasha of Hukat, that's called the irrational parasha, the parasha that deals with para aduma, is the very same parasha, my friends, that lists in it the deaths of two of the greatest people in history, of Miriam and Aharon. Both die in this week's parasha. So if you want to ask, if you're wondering, if, why do the righteous suffer? Yeah, there's no better parasha to ask it than this one. Miriam, what did she do that she shouldn't enter Israel? Aharon, the guy was the biggest Sadiq, Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, made peace between everybody. He's not going to enter Israel? Is that fair? Fair? Very good. It's not fair. It doesn't make sense. We don't understand why it's fair. That's why the deaths of these two giants is literally put in this parasha, Parashat Hukat. So I think the name of the parasha is not only revealing to us the characteristic of the commandments, it's also revealing to us an approach to life. When tzaddikim die, when righteous people are suffering, and we don't understand, it doesn't make sense. You see people that they're so good, and they have a hard time, whether it's financially or with children or with marriage, and it just doesn't make sense. We don't get it. What did they do? Why do they deserve it? You gave so many other people who are so much worse, you gave them this bracha. You gave them this blessing. You answered their prayer. Why can't you answer my child's prayer? Why can't you answer my parents' prayer? Why can't you answer my friend's prayer? Right? And we don't always understand. So Parashat Hukat, again, not only deals with the mitzvot that are irrational, but it also deals with the circumstances of life that are difficult to really grasp and to understand. And this is part of a chok. This is part of a chok. This is part of belief. This is part of emunah. And so the parasha, like we just said, it goes on and it tells us about the death of Miriam. And we know that there were 3 daily miracles in the desert. Okay? And let's go quickly through them one by one. What was the first miracle in the desert? We had the man. Very good. Number 2, the clouds. Number 3, water. Okay? The water, the be'er. And each one of these miracles came in the merit of one of the 3 siblings. Okay? This trio. Okay? Imagine that Shabbat table, by the way. Imagine your Amram and Yocheved. Imagine your Shabbat table. You know, Moshe, you're coming for Shabbat, you know what I mean? You have Moshe, Miriam, Aaron, wow, okay? Amazing. Imagine those 3. And each one brought different zechut, different merit, different miracles. So we know the man was in the merit of who? Was merit of Moshe, okay? And the water in the merit of Miriam, and the clouds in the merit of Aharon, okay? Now, the second Miriam dies, we find in our parasha. Let's just fast forward. Chapter 20, it says they get to Midbar Sin on the first day of the month. Okay, the first month, Nisan. Now you should know that our parasha jumps from year 1 to year 40. We don't know anything about the middle 38 years. 38 years, we have no information. All the stories that we read are either year 1 or year 40. The spies and Korach and the complaining and everything is either year 1 or Pinhas and that's year 40. There was nothing that happened in between. Okay? I mean, there was obviously things that happened in between, but nothing that we know of. Okay? And I want to again read to you this Rabbeinu Bachya, because look what he says right here. Chapter 20. Kol ha'eda midbar Sin. The entire congregation arrived to the desert of Sin. Look what he says. Eda shelema. Okay? It speaks of Kol ha'eda, an entire congregation. Why? Shekvar metu dor ha'midbar. Because right here, in our parasha, we fast forwarded to the 40th year, and the entire generation of the Midbar that was decreed to get wiped out died. And now, Ba'u habanim el eretz Kena'an b'chodesh harishon. And now it's the generation. It's G2. It's the second generation that's going to enter Israel. Vishnat Arba'im Haya, and it's the 40th year. V'da, and you should know, she'en b'Torah klal, that there's no mentioning in our Torah, shum ma'aseh, no story, or nevuah, or prophecy, rak b'shana rishona, or shnat arba'im, only the first year or the 40th year. Everything that we study is year 1 or year 40, and our parasha is jumping, okay? It's jumping all the way, without telling you anything. It didn't give us warnings. We have our rabbis telling this to us. But it jumps from the first year all the way to the 40th year. And this is the 40th year that the entire Kol HaEdah, a complete congregation, meaning, says Rabbeinu Bahye, a congregation, that is the people that are going to enter Israel, they arrive in Barsin, Vatamot Sham Miriam. Miriam passes away. Okay? Miriam passes away. Next pasuk, Velo haya ma'im la'edah. And there is no water for the people to drink. Okay? So you see over here direct correlation. And Rabbeinu Bachya says this explicitly. Kshemeta Miriam nistaleka be'er. When Miriam dies, the be'er leaves. They lose the well. Because the water was in her merit. Haya be'er b'zchut Miriam. Okay? Now, can anyone think of why Miriam should merit to have water? Why do we have water in her merit? And if you've paid attention the way Rabbeinu Bachya thinks, you'll get it right away. Measure for measure, my friends. Miriam was able to bring us water for 40 years, b'zchut, because haya la zechut hamayim in Moshe. Very good. Because she waited for Moshe when he was a little baby in the basket. She waited by the water, and for those few minutes, that was enough to allow the entire Jewish people to drink for 40 years water in her merit. She waited by the water. Now she's going to be able to provide water for the people for 40 years. Wow. Okay? Talk about karma. Okay? Unbelievable. Karma for good in this case. So the Jewish people, 40 years, they drink in the merit of Miriam. Okay? Now she's dead. What happens? There's no more water. Moshe and the people, let's read the psukim. We're chapter 20, pasuk 2. The people now come and complain to Moshe and Aharon. Moshe, people quarrel with Moshe. And vayomru lemor, they say, if only we had perished like our brothers all perished. Remember, we just said how the past 40 years, the generation of the desert all had to die. They all had to perish. They all had to die out so that the new generation could enter Israel. We're talking about 600,000 men dying. Okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, around 20,000 a year. And now you have this final generation that's going to enter. And you know what they say to Moshe and Aaron? If only we died like everybody else. Because with Moshe, we can't breathe. We need to drink. We're thirsty. We're going to die anyways. And if only we died a quick death like them, it's better than the death that we have now of no water. Why'd you bring us into the desert to die if you can't provide water for us? Okay? So you would think 40 years later, the generation learned their lesson. Right? But nope. They're still complaining. The kids are still complaining. Why'd you take us out to this place where there's no pomegranates? We don't see no milk and honey, Moses. Nope. We don't see no figs, no dates. I don't know what you promised us. Okay? You did a bait and switch on us, Moshe. Well, Moshe and Aaron, they need water. What are they going to do? They're not magicians. So they come and they bow in front of the Ohel Moed and the tents. And Vaydaber, and let's read the psukim, because we know what's coming, my friends. We know what's coming up right here. The famous sin of Moshe, okay, and the rock. Okay? So let's see it together. God says to Moshe, Kach et hamateh, take and pay attention to the words. Because today I want to go through a few different interpretations of what exactly was Moshe's sin. Because we know he sinned. Question is why? What? How? And it's not clear in the text. Let's read the text together and try to see for yourself what you think exactly Moshe did wrong. And I always found it humorous that Moshe does one wrong thing, but you're going to see, they blame him for 20 wrong things because each rabbi has a different reason. So Moshe does one wrong thing, but they have 20 reasons of what he did wrong, 20 different things he did wrong. Okay? And obviously, it's because there are so many different interpretations of what he did wrong, where he erred. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? It's not even clear what he did. It tells you that what he did wasn't even that bad, probably. Yeah, but on Moshe's level, it was bad. So what does he do? Let's see. God says to Moshe, take the staff, kach et hamateh, vehakel et ha'edah, and gather the people, ata ve'aharon, you and your brother Aharon, and v'dibartem el hasela, and speak to the rock, le'enehim, in front of them. Ve'natan memav, and it'll bring forth water. Ve'hotzeta lahem mayim min hasela, and then when you bring forth water, you'll give them and their cattle to drink. Beautiful. Vayikach Moshe et hamatem lefnei Hashem. Moshe takes the staff in front of God. Vayikahalu Moshe ve'Aharon takahal, and they gather the people et bnei hasela to the rock. Vayomer lahem, and he says, Shim'u na hamorim, listen, you rebels. Hamin hasela hazeh notzi lachem mayim. Shall we get water from you for you out of this rock? Vayare Moshe et yado, and Moshe raises his hand. Vayach et hasela b'mateu pa'amayim. He hits the rock twice. Vayetzeu mayim rabim, and much water came out, and everyone was able to drink. Okay, very straightforward story. God says, take your staff, speak to the rock. Moshe takes his staff. He says to the people, you want water? I'll give you water. He hits the rock 2 times, and there was plenty of water. Okay, next. All of a sudden, God says to Moshe and Aaron, I can't believe it. Ya'an lo he'emantem bi, because you didn't trust in me, to sanctify my name in the front of the Jewish people, you will not come into the land of Israel. Phew. Unbelievable. This is it. 40 years, Moshe is like, walking on eggshells. He's doing everything right. All of a sudden, one thing, we don't even know what he does. We have to see in a minute. And God's like, I can't believe you just did that. You are not going into Israel, Moshe. And Aharon, both of you, prepare your will. You will not come in. You're going to send your student. End of story, period. No, there's no more elaboration on this. There's no like, oh God, we're sorry, give us another chance, we didn't mean it. Nothing. Period. End of paragraph. Next paragraph is a completely different story. And what is their crime? What do Moshe and Aaron do wrong? Okay? Let us see Rabbeinu Bachya together, my friends, for a few different interpretations. Okay? And I see many people over here texting me, writing on the side what they believe, what they've heard in the past, and all are true. And let us see together the words of Rabbeinu Bachya. Veda, and he begins and he says, Veda, you should know, Kirabu hadeot beparasha azot, that there are many opinions on this paragraph, on this topic. V'nechalku hamefarshim, and the commentaries are not united. There's big machloket. Bechet'o shel Moshe ma haya, what was Moshe's sin? And let us go, of course, and he begins, Da'at Rashi, Rashi's opinion, Ki Moshe Rabbeinu, Alav Shalom, Moses, Lo nitztava behaka'ah. Moses was never commanded to hit. Rak sheyedaber, to only speak, to speak to the rock. Sheyotzi ma'im b'shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You should speak to the rock in the name of God, right? Like it says, V'dibartem el hasela. So you're going to ask, if he was only meant to speak to the rock, then why did God say, take your staff? If you paid attention well, it says in the beginning, right? God says to Moshe, Kach et hamateh, take your staff. So why take my staff if I'm not meant to hit with it? If I'm only meant to speak to the rock, why'd you command me to take my staff? That's a question that you may ask on Rashi, because Rashi is very clear. Rashi says Moshe's problem was that he hit. You're not supposed to hit. You're supposed to speak to the rock. Okay? So then why'd you tell me to take my staff? Well, says Rabbeinu Bachya, all the time. Defending Rashi, all the time. Moshe took his staff. Right? Asher ta'aseh bo ta'atot. Okay? Nothing, no, just because I told you to take your staff, it doesn't mean that I meant that you should use it. Moshe always had his staff with him. Okay. Aval achet haya, so what was the sin? B'milat vayach, that he hit it. Shehika et haseh velo dibbero. He didn't speak like God commanded him to. Now, you should know, by the way, this is not the first time that they drew water from a rock. This actually happened 40 years ago in year number 1. The second we crossed the sea, there was no water. If you remember the story, you could go back, Perashat Beshalach, and open it up, and you'll find it black and white. When we crossed Yam Suf, when we crossed the sea, there was no water. And God said to Moshe, go and take your staff and go get water from the rock. And Moshe that time went and he hit the rock. Read the pasuk, my friends, back in Parashat Beshalach. You'll find it black and white. He hit the rock, and there was no penalty. There was no punishment. There was nothing wrong with hitting the rock. So Moshe, this is deja vu for him. 40 years later, he's under the assumption that you had to hit the rock again. And he does. And he didn't pay attention because God said, speak to the rock. Okay, I remember hearing one time a nice interpretation. Why was it okay for him to hit the rock 40 years ago, but not now? And the answer is because 40 years ago, he was leading a nation of slaves. And for that generation, hitting was okay. That was the language they spoke. They spoke with the shahata, They spoke with the slipper. They spoke with the belt. They spoke slaves. That was the language of the old country. You hit, and the kids listened. And the teachers hit, and the kids listened. And it's okay, because that was what was the understandable approach at the time. And you can hit a rock when you're talking to a nation of slaves. But Moshe, this is 40 years later. If you hit today, if you hit these people, it'll backfire. They won't listen. They won't obey. They'll just run away. These people, it's a new generation. People like this, you have to talk. You have to explain. You have to make it sensical. You have to make it something that's understandable. You got to know. My rabbi used to always say, "Dalif ne'miyat talmid." You got to know in front of who you're standing. You got to know your audience. 40 years ago, that was okay. The chinuch, the way to raise children was okay like that. But not today. This is a new generation. This is America. You can't do that over here. The rules are different. The people are different. The children are different. The students are different. It's a different way of kiruv. And when there's a parent that doesn't understand that, and they're still living in a different generation, when you have a teacher that doesn't understand that, and they're still living in a different time, when Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't understand that, and he's hitting, because that's how we educate. We hit the same way we hit back then. So what God says to Moshe is, then you cannot bring this people into the land of Israel, because you don't get it, because then you're not for this door, you're not for this group of people. It was okay, Moshe, for then, but you gotta get with the times in a way. There's something very powerful to that. And that's why chinuch, raising children, there's no mitzvot on how to do it. There's no books, there's no laws, there's no mesorah, there's no tradition on how to raise children, because one cannot learn from their parents necessarily what the right way to raise children is. Maybe if my parents did it this way, but for me, for this generation, for my kids, it's a completely different approach. And you try to raise a kid today the way your grandparents raised you in Halab, good luck. Doesn't work, doesn't fly. It's a different door. And a parent needs to be conscious of that and be aware of that. And so Moshe treating the people 40 years later, the same way. This is the approach. What do you mean? We hit. Okay? That's a big mistake. Okay, I remember hearing that one time. I found it to be very, 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 very powerful. So this is Moshe's mistake, my friends. When he hits the rock, God says you got to speak to the rock. And therefore, so what? He hit the rock. What's the big deal? So look what he says. That's why, first of all, they both got punished, Moshe and Aharon. Kishnehem hiskimu, because they both went along with the hitting and not speaking. And with this, they minimized the miracle. Because the rock would have brought forth water just by speech. And if that would have happened, Hashem mitkadesh, God's name would have been sanctified. Shahayu omrim, people would have said, they would have drawn the following conclusion: Ma'asela, if a rock that doesn't know and doesn't think and doesn't listen, but it still listens to God, obviously us, we have to listen to God. And Moshe would have been such an amazing lesson if you would have just spoken. But by hitting, you now gave an excuse to those that are deniers to say that by hitting, there was probably some magic involved over here, and it's not God's doing. And Moshe, you lost over here the opportunity of sanctifying my name. So this is Rashi's opinion. Okay? This is all Rashi. Rashi says the sin was, and this is I think the one that we know most. This is the one that everybody knows when growing up in school, is what they teach maybe, that Moshe's sin was he didn't speak to the rock, he hit the rock. So what's so bad if you hit the rock? What you hit the rock is, the problem is now people think it's magic instead of thinking that it's inspiring, instead of thinking that it's that it was a commandment, instead of thinking that it was God, they're going to attribute it to Moshe. Okay, very nice. Now you should know Rabbeinu Bachye is going to ask on each of these a question. He doesn't like any of these. Okay, and each one has a flaw in it. Okay, and then at the end, he gives a Kabbalistic approach, which we're not going to go into, okay, because it's a little bit deep. But at least these three opinions that he brings today are still very informative. Number two, let's see number two. Da'at HaRambam, the opinion of Maimonides. According to the Rambam, what was Moshe's sin? Nothing to do with hitting. Rather as follows. Hahet leMoshe b'milat hamorim. Moshe's crime over here was that he used the word rebels. What does that tell you? Listen, you rebels! Why are you calling them rebels? Sheka'as alehem. He got angry. Says Rambam, you know why Moshe hit the rock? You know why he didn't pay attention to God's word? God said, speak. If God said speak, then speak. Why did Moshe forget and hit? Says the Rambam, because he got angry. And what happens, my friends, when you get angry? Did you ever get angry? Sure, more than once maybe, right? What happens when we get angry? We lose it. You ever heard of that phrase, expression? I'm losing it. I can't, right? When you lose it, what does that mean, you lose it? It means you act in a way that you will 100% regret later. And when we get angry, all of our brain cells go out the door. And we do the dumbest things, the craziest things, the wildest things, things that don't make any sense. That's why it's so important in life, my friends, never to act when you're angry. If you're angry at your children, if you're angry at your employees, if you're angry at your spouse, don't say anything, because nothing smart's going to come out. Okay, nothing smart, and only something harmful, only something incorrect, only something that's inaccurate. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. And because of his anger at the Jewish people for complaining, he ends up forgetting a simple commandment of God of speak. And when you get angry, right, the anger takes you. You're not acting out of your own seichel anymore, right? When a person's drunk, right, what do they say? It's not him talking, right? It's the alcohol talking. The alcohol takes you over. Well, you should know that ka'as also could take a person over. When a person's angry, it's not them talking. The anger controls you. Right? You don't own it, it owns you. And therefore, it's very important to make sure that when we're angry, to shut our mouths, to leave the room, to just walk away, because we won't say anything that we will be happy later on that we said. Anything that comes out of our mouths, anything that we do, you will severely regret. Very important to make sure when you're angry to just breathe, right? Just breathe. Don't do anything. You calm down, then let's think about it. But when you're angry, you cannot think. The brain is shut off when anger is turned on. That's the rule. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says the Rambam, when Moshe got angry at the people, like calling them rebels, he forgot the halacha. He forgot what God commanded him. And look what he says. Hakadosh Baruch Hu dikdek alav. And God was very particular and precise with Moshe. A big guy like you, Moshe, ko'es, you getting angry when you're not supposed to? Any person of your stature, of a Moshe caliber, when people look up to you as a person who's religious, a person who represents God, a person who's important, and tenuotav kulan el hatzlachat haolam hazeh v'olam haba, and every action is being watched by your children, by the people, by your students. They're seeing how you act. And you are someone that you pray every day, you learn every day, you do a lot of tzedakah. You may not think you're religious, but your friends around you, you're much more religious than them. And they look up to you. To them, you're a rabbi. You have to be very careful how you act. Because you could be creating a chilul Hashem. You can be desecrating God's name with a little bit of anger when you show imperfection in character. And it's very bad, actually. It's one of the worst traits, anger. It's It only comes because of a bad quality in the soul. And that's what God says. The Jewish people are very smart. The generation that left the desert, that left Egypt, they say the youngest girl at the time was better and greater than the biggest prophet in history, Yecheskel. The youngest girl in the desert saw prophecy more than Yecheskel ben Buzi. So now you have all these wise intellectual people, and they see Moshe getting angry. Ra'uhu sheka'as. Vehu alav shalom en bo pechitut midah. And they know Moshe doesn't have bad midot. Maybe it happened to you. You ever saw a person that you really respect? Maybe a big rabbi, maybe it's a very important person in your life, a therapist, right? Someone that you know to be so refined. And all of a sudden you see them lose it. What automatically goes on in your head? What do you automatically think when you see someone on that level get angry? You automatically say, oh, I must have really done something wrong. Right? Because otherwise they wouldn't lose it. Over here, when Moshe gets angry, the people think it must not be Moshe getting angry. It must be that God told him to get angry. Or else why would Moshe get angry? Moshe is perfect. If Moshe is angry, it has to be because God's angry. And the truth is, Lo matzanu bazeh ka'as laHashem. God wasn't angry. People are asking for water. That's a legitimate request. What's wrong? Why can't they ask for water? 100% they're allowed to ask. And so when Moshe gets angry, they think it's God getting angry at them. And over here again, it led to a decline in the relationship the people had with Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So that's lesson number 2 of Maimonides, and that is again that we have to be super careful. We have to be super careful not to allow anger to take over. When we're angry mode, stay away, stay quiet, zip it, don't do anything. Moshe got a little bit angry and he forgot the halacha. Moshe got a little bit angry. He led the people to think that it was God that was angry with them, and that wasn't the case. So when you're on a level of and we're all on a level that are people for certain people, that they look up to us. We have to make sure that we're not creating, God forbid, a chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name. Okay. And finally, my friends, number 3, and we'll just wrap it up after this. Rabbeinu Hananel, again a very big rabbi from 1,000 years ago. He says, "Hachet, the sin was b'milah notzi." When they said, Moshe Rabbeinu said with Aaron, they said, "Hey guys, we will take out water from this rock." Notzi, we will take out. You're doing it. You didn't. It's not God doing it. And on a small level, Rabbeinu Hananel says, "Chashvu ksat Israel." That some of the people started believing that once God was on the rock in Horev the previous time, Vekan, and here lo nigla, he wasn't on the rock. Moshe v'Aharon asu ken be'ochmatan. It must be Moshe and Aharon did this miracle on their own. Shehotziu mayim min hasela velo me'et Hashem hayta zot. And it wasn't from God. And it was a failed opportunity, a missed opportunity to again instill emunah in the people. Now instead of thinking God's amazing, you know what they say? Moshe is amazing. And that's a very big mistake. It's never Moshe, it's never me, it's never the rabbi, it's God. And a person has to have that humility. Sometimes in life we carry a certain arrogance. When we achieve, when we succeed, when we do, when we help, we carry a certain, we carry ourselves in a certain way that gives over the impression that it was us. Maybe the way we talk or we act. A guy told me that his boss one time, he gave him his paycheck on Friday. He gave him his check. It was long waited. And when the guy got the check, he said, Baruch Hashem. Thank God. Right? A normal reaction. And the boss looked at him and said, what? No Baruch Hashem. Baruch me. Thank me. Thank me for your paycheck. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So we have to be very, very careful. Again, to make sure that we always carry humility, remembering that anything that we succeed, that we accomplish, there was people before that gave us the tools to accomplish those things. Whether it was God or our parents or our teachers. I can never achieve anything alone in my life. Everything that I ever achieved was because someone else, once upon a time, helped me get to this place that I am in right now. So that's another lesson, my friends, of this episode of Moshe in the rock. I think it's enough for today. We'll stop over here, and hopefully we'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.